All right, guys, audience, I don't know who you guys may be out there, but something asked me to share my testimony, and it's been a really long time since I've shared my testimony. And, I do believe that at the end of the day, it's something that we should all do. At the least, we should journal this because time goes by really fast, and it's incredibly hard to recall all the great things that God's done in your life. And even as I share this today, I want to preface it with the fact that I don't have a perfect memory. I don't remember all the details, but to the best of my ability, my hope is to share it, and if it encourages you, that's great. So I guess going back to high school, all my life, my sister and I, we were Buddhist. We went to the temple of my mother in a Chinatown in Seattle. And we were avid believers. We memorized the sutras. We served. At one point, I'm an extreme guy, and so I even considered perhaps becoming a monk and shaving my head. For some reason, that all just didn't make sense. This whole life of asceticism and, I guess not enjoying the joys of life, not having sex, not having a wife, it just didn't make sense to me. So fast forward to, I think it was junior year of high school for me. A buddy of mine invited me to Co-High, which stands for College High School, and at first I didn't want to go, but what was interesting was he said he was willing to pay for me, and I think at the time it was like $100 or something. So basically, that's a lot for somebody in high school. I don't know if all about inflation and all that, maybe it's not that much to you guys anymore, but at the time it was a lot. And so, before going to this, if I can just give a bit of context, I've heard of, I suppose Jesus, this person called Jesus and God that Setna and the Jains spoke about. And I knew the Jains through my sister, who was, I believe, good friends with Salil at the time. And I knew of the Jain family, and they had this huge compound that they lived in, and they had these letters called Verdaan. I forgot exactly what it means, but I think it's probably something reflective of their faith or God. And so I kind of had tinkered around with the idea of God and talking about, I guess who Jesus was, and with respect to, Buddhism, and how I believe Buddhism at the time was superior to Christianity, because Buddhism believed, the philosophy at least, believes in relativism, and kind of like there's a separate truth for everybody, which is just more amenable, I believe, than what Jesus says, which says, that he is the only way, to heaven. And in addition to that, I was dating this chick, and at the time, she had told me a lot about, God and that sort of thing too. And she played an interesting, person in my life, sharing Jesus, I suppose. And this was during my middle school years. So again, fast forward to junior year in high school, somebody invited me to this college retreat. I ended up going to the retreat, lots of friends, lots of girls, Supposedly at the time there's a bunch of, people hooking up in Co-High, and I ended up subsequently hooking up with one of the girls at Co-High. Of course, this is after I accepted Jesus, so it was okay. And so anyways, I went to this retreat, and I remember at the time, now here's where my memory gets somewhat murky. There's an MC, his name was David Sue. He basically broke up the room into 4 corners. And one of the corners was for like the backslidden Christian. The other corner was for those who want to just commit and I think affirm their life for Jesus. And one of the other corners was for those who did not know Jesus. And I forgot what the other corner was for. But I remember the corner that I went to, and it was the corner essentially for the infidels or the unbelievers. And I remember when everybody started dispersing to the different corners, Davis was like, and I didn't want to go, of course, it's just like, singling me out, it's just awkward. But then I remember him saying something to the effect of, hey, don't let Satan tempt you and make you sit there, go to a corner. And so I got up, went to a corner. And so obviously I go to this corner, there's some counselors there, and the counselor that I had met, which I found out later, his name was Reese Bettinger. And I don't know, I feel like he's probably overseas doing some crazy stuff right now in a good way for God's glory and kingdom. But at the time, Reese Bettinger came up to me. I believe we were both sitting on the floor. It was somewhat dark. And he asked me, if I was a believer or something to that effect. And I told him I wasn't. And I don't remember exactly, but eventually the conversation came to, well, I think for me, I was like, well, is God real? And if he's real, I'd like to feel his presence. And which I feel like for anybody that's logical, that doesn't believe in God, that's the question that you would ask. Is just, hey, okay, I don't believe in this person you call God, and if he's real, then show him to me. And so I asked Reese that, and I also, for some reason, I don't know why I brought it up, most likely because of the Jan family, but I asked him if tongues was real. And then he told me that it was, and I'm like, okay, great, if it's real, let me hear this language of yours. And so he said that, well, but James, why don't we sit down or I think we were sitting, but he's like, why don't we pray about you feeling God's presence, and then I pray for you in tongues as well. And so I recall that, we closed our eyes, he started praying for me, and I think it was the most incredible feeling I've ever experienced. I guess how I described that back then, probably I'd use more discretion now, but it was like having an orgasm. And I felt God's presence, and I just started bawling. And here's the thing, you have to understand that I have no context of this. It's not like I've been in church and I know this is how you're supposed to respond when you feel God's presence. That seems to be typically the case, but at the time I had no context for this. I was a Buddhist, and I wouldn't say I had a lot of Christian friends either. I guess the context for that too is that I haven't cried for so long. My dad had left, had an affair with some of the ladies. My dad had left, and so I feel like growing up, it's just I was like the man in the family. It was my mom and my sister and myself, and so yeah, it was very different for me. And it was by the time I opened my eyes, I knew that God was real. And if you asked me whether or not I knew that my name was James or I knew that God was real at the time, I would have told you that I believed that God. I was more sure of the fact that God existed and that he was real. And so, right after that, I think a couple of the counselors came around me. They started praying for me. Another guy, I think his name was Rick Bang, and I think his wife too, and they started praying for me. They started prophesying over me, and they were telling me about, my family, things that they shouldn't have known. Like they knew that my aunt was a monk, and she lived with us. I remember, I think I had like a little picture of Buddha or something like that, and so they told me to renounce Buddhism, like right then and there. And I think there's a big like garbage bin that they told me to throw it away. And at the time it was really weird because this was happening so fast. I mean, I'd been a Buddhist for so many years, and during very formative years of my life too, with that, I guess, indoctrination and that sort of thing. So it was really hard for me to kind of renounce it and throw it. And I was like, oh man, I got to do this all right now. I don't got time to, to deliberate and think this through. And I think the reason why I went with it, maybe to a degree there was some peer pressure perhaps, but really I think what it was like, hey, look, if I asked this supernatural being, whether or not I can feel his presence and whether or not he could show himself to me, he did. So I guess it would make sense. It would therefore follow for me to follow this, supernatural being. And so I accepted Jesus Christ in my life during the retreat. And I was super ecstatic because it was kind of weird. It's just like if you're pursuing truth, and you find it, you get really excited. At the time, I believe that I was sincere in pursuing truth. And I think also in the Bible, Jesus says something to the effect of, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so essentially what it says is like Jesus is truth. So when you find truth and when you find truth, it's not just like you learn something about Jesus, you know him. And so I was really excited, and it was really weird because I felt like a lot of the people I went to church with at the time, some of the friends I knew at least, were at ECC. I don't mean to call them out in a bad way, but I felt like some of the people there were kind of skeptical. It's like, why is this James guy, who I was kind of known. I definitely wasn't a goody two-shoe Christian church kind of guy, type of guy, even though I didn't go to church. But I felt like some of them gave me a weird look, especially my friends, because they thought that I was kind of going whack. I was like, relax, okay, you just accepted Jesus, what's the big deal? But at the time, it was a big deal to me. And then I guess, just for future sake, my hope is that whenever someone accepts Christ and they really respond, I guess however they respond, that for me just to, take it as face value. I didn't hold it against them or anything like that. They're they're cool people, they're fun people. And so after Koha, I came back home and shared the news with my mom and my sister. And the first thing, I was really excited when I shared it with them, but their response was they broke down and started crying. Up to that point, Buddhism was kind of like the bond that kept our family together. Like we would go at least once a week, and I think oftentimes twice a week. I think it was like a Friday, Saturday. And so, so my sister and my mom, they just started bawling and crying. My sister thought I was like demon possessed. And I think that those were her words too. And so after accepting, I told them, hey, look, I know this is the bond that we have, but I had this crazy experience, it's just like how to, what am I supposed to do, And so, after that, and this is kind of overlap on what I'm going to say later on, but there was a lot of persecution in the family. And, there were often times that my mom even threatened, and I believe she even taken my clothes and thrown it outdoors and, basically saying, hey, look, if you want to do this whole Christian thing, you're not doing it in this house, not in English, in Vietnamese, to that effect. And so, it was tough because, I did love my mom and my sister, and there was a big rift between us for years, well, at least with my mom. And so I guess the next step would be what do I do with this newfound faith, that I had. And this is where my memory gets murky, but I believe that because the Jans and Sepna had kind of introduced me to this concept of tongues, and which kind of led through the experience that I had at Kohai at the retreat, I asked Sepna to start Bible study. And I think the first people that joined it with us, obviously, was Sepna, who led the Bible study, and Quang Din and Salil Jan, her brother. And so, I remember those were some of the best years, I think, in my faith. It was a lot of fun. It was a period of time where we kind of, the sky was the limit. We did what we wanted. We pursued truth. It was an open slate. And I believe for the most part, I was an open slate. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't have family in the clergy. Everything I learned and all the questions I had, I believe was, authentic, I suppose, And so, so we did that, and I forgot how shortly after, but I think shortly after, like a couple months after, my sister knew that I was going to this Bible study, and again, she knew Salal, and so she felt like she was going to go to this Bible study and kind of prove everybody wrong, and that Buddhism was the way, At the least, I think she was trying to snatch me out of the jaws of Jesus or something. And so, she started going to this Bible study, and I guess, she learned, she asked all the questions she wanted to ask. And interestingly enough, a year later, I believe, when we went to this conference called Acquire the Fire, acronym was ATF. I don't even think they're around anymore. Their logo looks like Atari or something. And a year later, she accepts Jesus. So, and here's the thing. I believe at the time that she accepted Jesus, I don't even think I was really going to the Bible study anymore. My sister had become more adamant, but she was more committed to the Bible study than I was, which is fine by me. And so she accepted Jesus, and so that was like the next blow, for my mom. And I think it was really tough for our family because not only did she lose her son, now she lost her daughter, And so I believe that the persecution that my sister had, was way more severe than mine. Number one, I'm a dude, and it's just kind of like, for my mom, when she's talking, it's kind of like this, and I just zone her out after a while. But for my sister, I think it was a big deal because they were really close, the whole mother-daughter thing. And so, so as a result of that, though, one of the upsides was that my sister and I got a lot closer, because we had the same faith. And though sometimes we were on different tracks, like she was kind of doing her own thing, and sometimes I think she was probably growing more than I was, which is great, and I don't mind that. So I think my sister accepted. So if I can just get the timeline straight, in 2000, I went to Kohai, I accepted Jesus. Shortly thereafter, started the Bible study with Sapna. And around 2001, my sister accepted Christ. And then I think the next thing that we did, which was really interesting. A couple years later, after that, I went on a missions trip to India with SEPNA, a team which SEPNA had led, and I believe that it was one of the first ones, or I think it was the first one. And so I think heretofore, as a believer, however strong, I don't think I've gone on any missions trips. And so that was my first and last. That's kind of crazy. It tells you something about SEPNA, doesn't it? No, just kidding. No, it was a really good experience. So SEPNA led a trip to India. My sister was there. Kwang Salul, I think Jennifer was there too. and Hyacinth. Okay. And so SEPNA led a trip to India, and I gotta tell you guys, it was the craziest trip. It was really, really tough. And
before you even talk about it, do you want to talk about how your mom had said, what she'd said if you actually go on the trip, what she'd do?
Right now, I don't recall it. She said a lot of severe things to my sister and I, and she's threatened to kick us out multiple times. So I would imagine that she said something to that effect. And I don't know if we were rebellious or if we were passionate for Jesus, and that's why we still wanted to go on the missions trip, you know. But yeah, so we we went to India. We didn't really have any preparation, and I think there's something cool about that. You know, it wasn't like this. It wasn't like this thing that this long tradition of all the kids going to, you know, like missions every year, same place or anything like that. It was kind of, I don't know if it's haphazard, but it was, I don't know how to put it, but basically what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of nice because I think it was the first time for SEPNA to lead the trip as well, and so it was new for all of us. I remember the weather in India and the smog in India was just horrible, and I think that the pollution over there induced my asthma, and so I couldn't breathe. I remember I had this nasty cough, and the weather was over 100 degrees. It was just really, really rough. You know, there were bugs and lizards, and it's just it was crazy. So let me see so during the missions trip, God did a lot of miracles, you know, and I remember during the time we were there, we basically prayed for anything and everything. We would pray for people who were deaf. We would pray for people, I believe, that might have had AIDS or something like that. We went to slums. We went to drug rehab places. It was crazy. And so that was one of the things that was kind of crazy, was that we would just pray for anybody, and we would believe, and I believe the faith was sincere at the time, while it may have been like young or inexperienced, but we would pray and just believe that people would be healed. So I remember this one time we prayed for somebody that was deaf, and DEAF, and not someone that was dead. No, just kidding. Someone that was deaf, and I remember, we would snap my fingers in the back to see if he would hear it or if there would be any response, and there was no response. And then we'd pray and pray, and then all of a sudden I snapped my fingers, and that guy, the kid, I believe, it was a kid with a big head, he turned around and he looked or something. He reacted to it. And so I think there's a translator, of course, because I don't speak Hindi, and so I think somehow it's translated back to me that, he can hear now. Now, I don't know how well he heard or anything, but I remember at that moment, I started questioning, like, well, is this God, or was that kid, was he already not deaf to begin with? And I think what's interesting is, like, it's just one of those moments where God, if you're set on not believing, no matter what miracles may come, they're not going to be deemed as miracles. And as far as you're concerned, it's not a miracle. And so I think it's just one of those times where, for a moment, I think I let Satan kind of snatch that miracle from me. But there were a lot of examples like that, that we prayed for people that were demon-possessed and stuff like that too. And, I know that in times today, we live in a very educated society, and we're very practical, logical, and we believe that kind of like the knowledge is the end-all, be-all. I think it's really easy for us to justify why things like that can't happen. But this is and I definitely share some of those sentiments, for better or for worse, now. But I think that there's still something to be said I suppose with the childlike faith that God says, hey, look, this is my word, just believe it. And at the time, that's what we did. And so we would go to, all these different places, and Sepna would have some crazy schedule. We'd be up for like 20 hours straight. We'd have 4 hours of sleep. I mean, I think everybody was getting sick. Everybody's just like, oh, it's crazy. We'd be going on trains at night with cockroaches crawling all over you. And at that point, it didn't matter. You're so tired, you have to sleep because, you're just constantly on it. And what was really crazy was just seeing all the different Indians, is that how you put it? They're so passionate and on fire for God. They all want prayer. By way of example, this one time we were out in some field, and it was like 115 degrees or something that day, and it was incredibly hot. And they just had like some tarp or something overboard, and literally you're just dripping with sweat, like constantly, nonstop. And there'd be this crazy line of people that just want prayer. Like if I were them, I would want to get better shade or go somewhere cooler, but they just wanted to stick around and ask for prayer. And so so I guess that was it was a really good experience. And again, like I said, it was my first mission trip and my last. Hopefully not, won't be my last. I'm 31 years old now, and at the time that I went on that mission trip, which I guess was in 2003, so that was about 11 years ago. So that I was 20. Wow, that's been a long time. But yeah, it was great, and I think there was a couple other mission trips that Sepna took the people on as well. And I guess so fast forward, so after that, we had two buddies of mine, whose names are Wing Lum and Solo Jan. We were praying around. We sat around praying one day. I believe we were at my house actually, and all of a sudden we get this. I guess we called it a vision back then. I don't know what I call it now, but we get this idea or a vision, I guess. If you have faith, you call it a vision. And we get this vision, or we get this idea, like, hey, look, we should get a rally at UW. And I believe all three of us were going to UW at the time. I don't know if Salon graduated. I think he was a year early, but he was a year ahead of me. So I think he was still at UW. And so we get this thing like, hey, look, let's just do this rally. We were really excited. We were on fire. We had, I don't know exactly how it all came together, but I think we had this Bible study that Sepna has started. A lot of us went to this church called Jubilee, Evangelical Church, yes. And so I think there's a lot of people that were just really energetic and really, I guess, had faith. And we were surrounded by a lot of those types of believers. And so, yeah, we had this idea, start Shekinah, and I think we set it for May 20th, which is 2 months out from the time that we got the idea. And so within a very short period of time, we connected with, we initially actually used Jubilee as a rallying point, I believe. And so we talked to our friends, we said, hey, like, we got this idea. And then all of a sudden we're praying in Red Square, which is kind of the heart of UW. So, and I think we prayed every night. I think it started at 9 or 9:30. I don't remember exactly. I think, yeah, maybe 9:30. Yeah, 9 or 9:30. And sometimes we prayed till like 1, 2 in the morning. It was ridiculous. We did this for 2 months straight. And I mean, it was crazy. We'd be praying in tongues, we'd be slaying people in the spirit. I'm sure there's a lot of godly things and ungodly things that happened, but the hope is that God honors it, Like, we did try to do the right thing. And so we rallied a bunch of people, lots of organizations got involved. And I feel like at that time I kind of got to know a lot of, there's a lot of politics, with paraministry churches, or paraministry events, and also within the church, clearly. And I feel like, I kind of got a taste of it. And it was interesting because there'd be some really big churches that supported us, in private, but wouldn't support us in public. And I think the idea was if we did something wrong, we'd reflect that on them. And I've never ran a 10,000 person church, so it's hard for me to say why I think that's somewhat disingenuous or whatever. But I was more immature back then than I am now. So we had this idea we're gonna get thousands of people on Red Square on May 20th, and so we pray. All of a sudden, we have like hundreds of people coming out to prayer. Certain nights, I think we definitely had hundreds of people coming out to prayer. It was crazy, and we met lots of cool people. People were being saved even prior to the event. The day the event happens, and I remember I think early in the day it was like raining, and and then when we started the event, I think it was still raining, and some dude in the back had this huge sign that said, "Hey, can God part the clouds?" And so anyways, it was raining. It didn't dampen anyone's spirits, and then all of a sudden the sun came out, and so subsequently that sign was taken down. I guess that was kind of cool. The event happens. I think we have like 2,000 people show up. King 5, we covered on King 5. And I believe the one whoever covered us was actually a believer as well. But I remember the words that they said that, like, revival is happening or something like that. Something crazy, that's on a secular, news channel or whatever. And it's just amazing what just an idea and a few people that believe that God wants me to do something, what could come of it. I don't know what happened, ultimately with Shekinah after that. The goal was to have people continue to believe, to sow into people's spirit, to people's lives and that sort of thing. And but at the time, the concern was, well, you're going to do this revival thing, then what's going to happen? How are you going to equip people? We also had an acronym, which I forget. And I think we failed to equip people. We did plant some people within the church, which was a good thing. And I think there were some leaders that were developed. And I still hear about it, from time to time, even today as I I just talk to random people. But so that was a really cool experience, and I really believe that it's kind of just like the environment. And when I reflect on my faith at the age of I'm not 31, I'm 32. I just recently turned 32. It's crazy. Okay, so you gotta correct my math. But what's really crazy is that you hear it all the time that your most generally speaking, your most formative years in the high school years. I was lucky. I was with the right people. God put the right people in my life, and then typically it plateaus during college. And you hear about it, you know about it, and you just see all these people that are older with families, and they're just valley of dry bones and that sort of thing. But it's interesting because even like today, I'd say that those are some really memorable years of my life. And I don't know if God has another act for me, and or maybe it looks differently with respect to the marketplace. But I do believe that it's way harder to maintain, I guess the zeal for the Lord. As you have a mortgage, you got a kid, you got a wife, you got commitments. It's just it's really hard. And so. But one thing that I think, a miracle that God did do somewhat in my life, I believe. So when I have faith, I wake up with faith, I think it's a miracle. When I don't, then I just think, perhaps, it's a confluence of events. So after graduating, we started a Christian t-shirt company. Many of you will not have heard of it anymore because I think we took it down, but it was JesusBranded.com and called Stripes 39, and we did jeans, and we did all this stuff. And I did that for I think a couple years or something like that, and then there's a falling out with our buddies, same buddies actually, that's kind of, and I still love them, care about them. They're all doing different things and successful, at what they do. But I think there's a falling out. I was really distraught, devastated. I lost a really good friend, and then I went to go work for. Now, interestingly, when I was working for that startup company, the t-shirt company, the goal was to generate enough money so I could invest in it because I'd always been like a Warren Buffett fan, even as I was younger. And then I went to go work for this private equity company, investing in real estate related loans, bridge loans, acquiring distressed assets and notes. Basically you acquire paper that has claims to value. And then after that, I felt like God wanted me to go somewhere else. I went to work for this other company called Freestone Capital, and they were a bigger company. They managed a few $1 billion, and which was kind of like just totally random how I got the job. I didn't know anybody there. The guy that I knew there which was the owner of the company, said he wouldn't help me, and then I ended up getting a job there, just going up the chain, and you know, anyways, I you know, I think me getting that job was kind of a miracle in itself. I get a job working for Freestone. Then after that, you know, I felt like it was time for me to start my own fund, and it's called Opal. And what's kind of crazy is when I reflect back on the last 10 years, this would not have been the route that I would have chosen. If I could have chosen, I would have stayed at the startup company with my buddies, you know, because we had that camaraderie and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I believe that what God wanted me to do was to invest money, and that's just what makes me tick. And so when I reflect back on life, I'm like, oh man, you know, I can't believe that all that stuff is orchestrated with respect to my career in my marketplace for me to be here and invest money today. Even today, my success is not a foregone conclusion. I just take it the day at a time, and I believe that I'm going to keep doing what I do as long as God gives me the platform in which to do it with. And so what's crazy is even the, you know, like the big investments that I make are somewhat related to my past, you know, and it makes sense, right? Because, you know, you invest, the idea is you invest in what you know well and what you're the expert at. And so, yeah, it's, you know, now the goal is, as I'm sharing this, is not to wax my own ego or anything like that. But the takeaway, I think, is when you do what I do, the odds are so low, you know, it's so low to succeed. And again, like I said, I'm not there yet, and it's not foregone, you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that I will ever get there. But, you know, I think God orchestrated it, and now I get to do what I love to do, and I enjoy it. I do it in the morning, I do it for work, I'll do it before I go to bed, just so I can memorize the numbers and do my calculations while I'm in bed and thinking about it. And really, it's amazing, you know, I guess the path that God's taken me here with respect to the marketplace. And yeah, I don't know, you know, what God wants or what God has in store for me in the future. My faith now, I'd say, you know, is not at its highest per se, but maybe, you know, it just takes a different form. I'm not exactly sure. But when I look at my professional career and how God works that miracle, maybe it's like bigger miracles over a longer period of time. I don't know. But but I do want to say that, you know, it's just during your I guess during your high school and college years, you know, just don't waste it. You know, shoot for the stars. Some really cliche lines I'm giving you guys, but you know, I believe there's truth to it. And the hope is that, you know, you don't completely fizzle out, you know, when you get older and you have kids and stuff like that. And then, you know, the easy thing is to pass the baton to your kid and like, hey, look, my hope is in my kid now. That's my main focus, you know. But I think sometimes that's a cop-out, you know. So anyways, I think that's really all I have to say. And I guess I wish you guys, or whoever you guys may be, you know, the best of luck. But anyways, all right.